You might notice that this is a pretty big truck, and it is. But more than that, it has 6 wheels. And this isn't a party trick either. All 6 wheels are driven by the engine. That means you'll have traction on all 6 wheels. So today, we're gonna look at how this is possible, how we designed this Rezvani Hercules 6x6, and some of the engineering challenges that we overcame to design this vehicle. So today, we're going to talk about the technical aspects of Rezvani vehicles. We're going to talk about how they're designed, how they're made, and the engineering that goes into them. So how do we get all 6 wheels on this vehicle to be driven by the engine? Well, most vehicles are either front or rear wheel drive only. To get 4-wheel drive, you have to install a transfer case. A transfer case is either selectable or all-time, meaning you can choose if all 4 wheels are driven or if only the front or only the rear wheels are driven. Now, how do we get from 4-wheel drive to 6-wheel drive? Well, essentially, we have a pass-through axle here, which allows us to stick another drive shaft in it and power the rear axle. So now we have power going to all 3 axles. We use a selectable transfer case between the engine and the front and rear axles so that we can determine if the front axle is engaged or disengaged. Now, with this extra axle, we also need extra length. So we use this frame extension here, which gives the bed up here a place to sit, and it also gives these springs a place to sit. This gets welded together. The bed mounts are added here, and that allows us to have the extension we need to fit this last axle in. Now we have to think about the drawbacks of having 2 sets of wheels and tires back here. The bed is the lightest part of the vehicle, and so we have to get creative to use all this traction that we have back here. First, we use lighter springs because there's less weight to support. Second, these wheels are so close to each other that we limit the articulation or the vertical movement of these with bump stops. This ensures that there's no issues with the drive shaft connecting both of these sets of wheels. While we're back here, let's talk about the body of the vehicle. The body of the vehicle is made from fiberglass, and for the military editions, we either layer Kevlar or we put steel underneath the bodywork to give us a ballistic level dependent on the specification of the vehicle. Now inside, the fiberglass ends and the leather begins. We have leather seats, leather armrests, leather airbag covers, leather door panels, and a leather steering wheel. Once you get past all the leather, we have numerous other luxuries inside the vehicle as well. We have heated seats, we have an upgradable sound system, and we have an interior lighting package. We have 3 options for sound systems: standard, premium, and ultimate audio. With all of them, you get a large center touchscreen mounted in your dashboard. Inside this enclosure, we have 2 subs. Both of them are driven by an amplifier. So these subwoofers use 600 watts of power, which is approximately equivalent to 0.8 horsepower. Now that may not sound like a lot until you realize that these subs, the actual cones in the subs, don't weigh very much at all. Our mid-range and our tweeter speakers are upgraded as well. While our standard audio uses paper cone speakers, and we get the most out of those as possible, there's only so much you can do with paper cone speakers. Therefore, we upgrade to these polypropylene cone speakers, which gives us a huge advantage over paper cone speakers. Now the last thing, and the most exciting thing to talk about on these vehicles, is the engine. And we have a lot to talk about here. So let's talk about how usable this power actually is, and how much power we can actually create from an engine. We have anywhere between 285 horsepower to 1,300 horsepower. But how do we use that kind of power? Well, remember before how we talked about the rear drive line and how we wanted to make sure that the vehicle wasn't under or oversprung, meaning it wasn't too stiff or too bouncy? Well, it has a lot to do with that. Well, one way that we keep all that power is by maintaining contact with the road. And having 4 tires in the back helps, but it's not a slam dunk. We have to make sure we get the spring rate correct. That way, we're not bouncing all over the place and bouncing off the road. So while the engine can output up to 1,300 horsepower, not all of that makes it back to the wheels. Usable horsepower is dependent on us making everything in the system as light as possible, but still maintaining structural integrity so that we can cope with all of that power that the engine's making. So while we try to keep everything as light as possible on this vehicle, in its top trim spec, this vehicle is in the neighborhood of around 8,000 pounds. So while there's a ton of engineering, a ton of horsepower, and this is a very capable vehicle, it's not light. So while this was a general overview of the Rezvani Hercules 6x6, there's a lot more we can cover on this vehicle, from design, engineering, to just how customizable this vehicle really is. Comment what you want us to talk about next, subscribe if you want to see more like this, and I'll catch you next time. Adios.